please state your name, rank, and serial number.
Were you in like an alternate time warp there? You were actually in February 5th checking on things in the past.
I think so.
That's why you lost track of the date. My name is Robert Appel. I'm a lawyer. I have 2 law degrees. I'm a certified mediator. I'm a ex-journalist for a number of large news organizations. I've written a number of books. And I've done, I guess, a lot of different things over the years. I believe I was about 12 or 13 years old, and I was trying to build a relationship with a young lady who was also around 12 or 13 years old. And she was not interested in spending any time with me, but she did take some time to explain to me how amazing these books on someone called Edgar Cayce was. That's how she pronounced it, Cayce, which of course was incorrect, because I later found out it was pronounced Cayce. So I remembered that, and later on when I was passing a bookstore and saw this bestseller on Edgar Cayce by Jess Stern called The Sleeping Prophet, which I think sold enormous amount and it was translated all over the world, I read the book, and I read it again, and I read it again, and I read it again. I could not believe what this book was saying. And then I started reading books about Cayce, reading Spy Cayce. I joined the Cayce organization. I read other books that were channeled material, and I guess that was the beginning. I've never really stopped. I've read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. I have them still around the house, and we just keep going. There was a period between, let's say, my teenage years and maybe my late 20s when I did actively explore the area, but more on a theoretical basis. And I'll explain what I mean by that. I was very active with a number of news organizations. I was associated, for example, with the Montreal Gazette. I was associated with CBC Radio out of Montreal. I was doing some work for some Toronto affiliates. And whenever I had a chance, I would chase down any story that was related to metaphysics. For instance, I remember Helen Wambach, who wrote several books on reincarnation based on her ability as a hypnotist. And she had done a number of those. And I chased that down, and I was able to chase down a number of people. I would go to the psychic fairs, which were very popular in those days, and people would give demonstrations of their talent, and I would do interviews with those people as well. I wasn't quite sure what the use of all this would be, but I would chase them down as well. I interviewed a man, for instance, back in the 70s who was in the Guinness Book of Records for the Firewalk, and was actually featured on an NBC special. I got to know where his ability came from, and so on. But by and large, these abilities that I was exploring were theoretical. By the time I got into my late 20s, I became very sick with a medical condition, and that's when they became less theoretical. Well, I believe it was 1976 or 1977. I had just finished my bar exams. I'd been diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is an uncomfortable condition, to put it mildly. And after I finished the exams, which was a critical point in your life, really you focus all your energy on that and you're not paying attention to your health. After I finished the exams, I became aware that I was on this huge regimen of drugs, which was sulfa drugs, which are not given anymore for that condition, by the way, cortisone, which is still given but has a lot of side effects. And even though I was taking more and more of the drugs, I was getting worse and worse. This was a concern. And I decided this was really something I had to deal with. So I went to see all kinds of different people, different specialties, and ended up, I don't know exactly how, ended up in Toronto, where someone named Nikki Andres, who was representing at that time Douglas James Cottrell. And she was very happy to hear from me because I had press credentials. And she said, well, by coincidence, my guy is doing this exhibition at this rented theater. We actually rented a theater for this purpose in Toronto. And it's going to be on Halloween night on the anniversary of the death of Harry Houdini, who had died, I don't know, 30, 40 years earlier. And Montreal. And Mr. Cottrell will be doing this demonstration of the Edgar Cayce style trance. And there'll be reporters in the audience, and they'll be asking him questions after and during the trance. And you're welcome to come and either sit in the audience or just watch. So I said, I'll go and watch if it's all the same to you. I was very skeptical. And I went, and I remember it was a dark theater, and I remember the Karen Cottrell put Douglas into trance, and the people in the audience started shooting out questions. And initially they were fairly innocuous questions like, how is this trick done? Or some jewelry was never found that was supposed to be very expensive, but it was never discovered, and where is the jewelry today? And I was very intrigued by the answers. On the jewelry question, for example, the answer was, it was very, very gentle answer. It wasn't, there was no emotion really to it, but it was still directed to answering the question. The answer was something like, well, if you would find the following individual who was the house servant to Mr. Houdini when he was alive, and you were to do a proper investigation, you would find the missing piece of jewelry with that individual. So I thought this was very interesting. And then at one point, there were two final questions to the thing which were burned into my brain. One was a question which I think most people in the audience didn't really understand. Somebody said, well, you're a medium and you're in a trance, and let's talk to Harry Houdini. And the answer came back, as we see it, the entity or the soul known as Harry Houdini is now in a experience on the planet. It could have been Venus, I don't remember which planet it was, or what you consider to be the planet of Venus, because in essence there would be vibrational places in these planets that we can't see or perceive in our present state, and is learning to understand the law of love. And it would be improper or imprudent or presumptuous to interfere at this point in time with this person. And I remember thinking to myself, sitting in the audience, I thought two things very clearly. I thought, first of all, this is precisely in keeping with the doctrine of planetary sojourns that was explained in some of the Cayce readings, but which most even Cayce people didn't understand. It was considered to be a little too esoteric for even the Cayce people, but it was consistent with that. And I was thinking also that if there's any fakery here, if there's any trickery here, then the intent would be to make the reporters happy, to make them pleased they showed up and give them something they can write about. It wouldn't be to basically, in a gentle way, say, no, we're not answering your question. And I remember thinking that so this guy isn't here to make any friends and influence people or get any headlines. He's doing whatever he thinks is correct. And I was extremely impressed by that. And the final question in that session was, go back to the deathbed of Harry Houdini when he died, like maybe a minute, 2 minutes before his death in Montreal on this day and time, and explain the conditions in the body at that time. And now I later was to discover that of all the many talents that Douglas Cottrell exhibits, the medical is the most astonishing. And out of nowhere, at a very rapid fire, we had all this extremely detailed information about the condition of Houdini's body, his organs, blood circulation, the nerves, moments before he died in Montreal. And it was astonishing. It was truly astonishing. Later on, Mickey Andres contacted me and told me that one of the reporters had taken the time and trouble to get hold of the medical records out of Montreal, because this was obviously a very well-known figure, and a proper autopsy was done. And the answer that he gave was that not only did everything that was said match the medical records, meaning conditions of the stomach and all that, but it was incredibly more detailed than anything that existed in the written record in Montreal. And it was so detailed and so far beyond what they had in the archives of Montreal that he couldn't even comprehend how to write about it. In other words, it was another dead end for his story. This was not a story that was going to be written, but it impressed the heck out of me. So that was how I met Douglas Cottrell.